Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to show you how to do an independent measures t-test in SPSS. I'm using SPSS version 25, but these instructions should work with pretty much any version of SPSS that you're looking at. Alright, so what we're looking at here is an example of 7-2 from our textbook where we're comparing two groups, and in this study they're all asked to estimate how long they think the Nile River is. This is purposely an ambiguous sort of question that people don't really know the answer to. And what we're looking at is how you structure the question and whether or not that influences the answers people give. And specifically what we're looking at is anchoring and adjustment. And that is, some people are given a really low anchor. They're asked, first of all, do you think that the Nile is longer than 800 miles long? Right? That's group 1. Group 2 was given a high anchor. They're asked, well, do you think that the Nile is more than 3,000 miles long? And whether or not they say yes or no doesn't matter. After they're asked that question, they've been anchored at a higher or a lower number. And then we ask them, okay, well, how long do you think it is? And that's what's represented in this estimate column here next to their grouping variable. All right, so first let's label our output. So right now it just says group 1 and 2. Group 1 is our low anchor group and group 2 is our high anchor group. So let's label that. We're going to go to the variable view, and under the values for group we're going to click on that, and we're going to say when is group 1 is our low anchor, and those are the people who are given 800 as an anchor. And then we click add. Then we have group 2 was our high anchor group, and they were given 3,000 as an anchor there. So, and then we click on add after that. Okay, so after we've done that, we say okay, and this just means that our output's going to be labeled now with low and high anchor rather than just 1s and 2s, which makes it easier to interpret our output. Okay, to do our independent measures t, we click on Analyze, Compare Means, Independent t-test. Our grouping variable is our independent variable. In this case, it's labeled group. We're going to move it over there. And we have two groups, high and low anchor. But note that it has two little question marks there. It wants to know which two groups we're comparing. And I realize in this data file we only have two groups, but SPSS doesn't know that. So we click on Define Groups, and I want to compare group 1 and 2, so I'm literally typing in 1 and 2. Those are the values over here in our data file, the 1s and 2s. My test variables are dependent variable, and this is people's estimate of the actual length of the Nile. After that, we click on OK. Okay. And then we get an independent samples t output. So we have two groups, the low anchor and high anchor group. You can see that they're labeled here for us. And our mean estimate length of the Nile was 1,281 miles in the low anchor group and 3,199.91 miles in the high anchor group. Now, our standard deviations for these groups are really different, right? So one is 497, the other is 1790. So remember, one of the assumptions of the independent measures t-test is that you're assuming that these two standard deviations are estimating the same population parameter. If one is much larger than the other, then you think it's likely that this assumption is violated. You can also look at Levene's test for equality of variance, and that's comparing these two standard deviations. That p-value of 0.003 is for the p-value for comparing these two standard deviations to each other. That p-value is really low. The data are not consistent with the null, which suggests that these two standard deviations are not estimating the same population parameter, which means that the assumption is violated. But SPSS does a correction and gives you a choice of which t-test to interpret. Equal variance is assumed as a normal student t-test. Equal variance is not assumed as the Welch's t-test. And so we're going to use the equal variance is not assumed because that p-value is low, indicating these two variances are not equivalent to each other. So we're interpreting the data from the last row here. The degrees of freedom, you'll note, are a decimal because it adjusts the degrees of freedom when doing this calculation with the Welch's t-test. Right. So our p-value there is 0.005 for our t of -3.42. The difference between the groups is negative 1,918.727. And then we have our 95% confidence interval. We can be 95% sure that the true mean difference is between these two values. Right? So this difference we're observing between the two means has a very low p-value of 0.005. That means this difference here is unlikely to be due to sampling error. Right? It seems to be a real difference. Right? So you'll note here that SPSS does not give us the standardized effect size. If you want those, you'll have to use a different program, and we'll have a different video showing you how to do that. Now you can also get graphs of your data here by clicking on Analyze Descriptive Statistics Explore. This isn't the only way to get graphs, but it's one way. And our factor is our group. Factor is another word for independent variable. Group is our independent variable, and the estimate of the length of the Nile is our dependent variable, so that goes into the dependent list. Under plots, I'm going to ask for a histogram, and it will also generate box plots as well as part of the output. So I'll have a histogram for each group as well as box plots comparing those two groups. Okay. So other than the effect size, that is everything that you need to know to run the analyses here in SPSS for the independent measures T for that example. Okay, I hope that helps, and good luck.